Well, it's time now for perspective. We often hear that young people today shouldn't expect to have just one career in their lifetimes, that the ever-changing jobs market requires flexibility and an open mind. But it's a message you rarely hear directed at people who are already a little further along in their professional lives. So why is that? And what are the benefits of trying something new when you're just that bit older? My guest today is Alan Swan, creator of the podcast Older, Not Over. Thank you very much for speaking to us here on France 24 today. Could you start by telling me a little bit about how this podcast came into being? What was your main inspiration?
Yeah, I was getting close to my own age I'm 41 now, and about 3 years ago I was getting to around the age of 38, and I thought, God, I love my career, I love what I do for a living, and I thought, really, if I get into the second half of my life, am I going to do something different? And then I kind of recorded a load of interviews with people who inspired me, who made a change, and then kind of left them to one side. Then, of course, the coronavirus happened, and we went into lockdown in Ireland in March of this year. And my wife said to me, Alan, do you know those interviews that you did with those people in their 40s who changed career? There's a lot of people now who are hurting, that are looking to change career, that have been forced to change career, and maybe those interviews will give them some inspiration. So we put them out, and the response has been overwhelming.
And what, in your opinion, are the main reasons that people feel afraid of possibly trying something new as they get a little older?
I think people, of course, have responsibilities, financial responsibilities. But the main thing that has come across from all the interviews that I've done is that people are afraid about what people are going to think about them, especially those closest to them. So we often worry about what our parents will think about us, even if they're a little bit older, our friends, our family. But sometimes you can do these things and make these changes gradually. It doesn't have to be one big bang where you kind of go, look, I've decided I am going to be a doctor all of a sudden. You do these things gradually. You build in the financial supports, you build in a plan, a goal of where you want to go. And once you do that, you can do something on the side that you're passionate about, and hopefully the two lines converge eventually.
And you have spoken to a lot of people for this podcast. What are some of the most interesting, inspiring stories you've heard?
One of the most inspiring guys is the author Lee Child, who wrote all the Jack Reacher books. Lee was made redundant from his job in Granada Television in his 40s. He was just gone 40, and he decided, look, he had never written a book before, and he decided, look, I'm gonna have a go at this. I'm gonna write a page a day and see what happens. And of course, he ended up writing the character Jack Reacher, and has gone on to sell millions and millions of books. But again, that spark, that issue of him being made redundant, he looked at it as a positive. He said, look, okay, if I'm going to make a change to my 40s, if I'm going to try something different in the second half of my life, what am I going to do? And he took a chance, he went for it, and it worked out for Lee.
Now, you're talking about the issues people can have explaining life-changing decisions to people close to them. But what about the industry? How welcoming is the professional world of people who are making big changes later on?
I think ageism is a big issue, and I think that it's something that I think the world is going to have to address. But I think with the pandemic, it has proven that experience is a very, very valuable commodity to have for your business. Somebody who has had a lot of life lessons learned can bring an awful lot to your organization. And I think slowly but surely, as this pandemic has gone on, I think organizations have realized the value on having an experienced hand at the wheel, that it's not a disadvantage to be that little bit older. If anything, I think businesses now need people who have gone through troubled times before, and that'll bring an awful lot to people's businesses.
Now, very recently, the British government was roundly ridiculed for launching an ad campaign in which it suggested that people try out new careers if indeed they had been affected by job loss during the pandemic, difficulties that the economies are experiencing at the moment. What was your response to that campaign?
I think it was just badly communicated. I think if people, this was more along the lines of people who, so for instance, I remember there was one famous ad that they ran with a ballerina, and it was like, look, you can't be a ballerina anymore. You're going to have to get a different job because of the pandemic. That person still wanted to be a ballerina. That was their vocation. That was their life. That's what made them get up in the morning. And I think they just communicated it badly. Older Not Over is more about people who are in a job that they just, that they kind of like, but they've got something else inside them that they want to do. So if you flip the premise of that, if that lady had been working in a data center, maybe she wanted to be a ballerina. Older Not Over is about kind of saying to yourself, but you know what, it's not too old to go off and do that. Whereas I think the issue that the British government had was a different kettle of fish altogether. They just got that wording and that communication completely wrong, in my opinion.
And at the risk of sounding like a pessimist, do you ever speak to anyone who's made that leap, but it just hasn't worked out for whatever reason?
I haven't yet, but I'm sure there are people out there that have tried to make that change and it hasn't worked out for them. But I think the important lesson in that is the word regret. That at least that when they get to the end of their days, whenever that is, they can say, I gave it a go. I took a chance. I didn't lie here about to close my eyes and go, God, I wished I just had done that. And I think regret is a big thing. So I think for people that are looking to make a change, try it. You don't have to do it in one big go. You can do it gradually. You can become that florist on the side with a side hustle. You can become that writer by doing a little bit every day. But don't have any regrets. Don't get to the end of it and go, do you know what? I wish I would have had a go.
And what are the sorts of resources that are out there for people that they might not necessarily be aware of if they're thinking of taking a leap professionally, for example?
Well, look, that's what Older Not Over is going to be about. If you sign up for the newsletter every week, it's oldernotover.com. We have a selection of stories to inspire you, resources that might help you along the lines of financial goals, how to kind of build your side hustle from the side, how to make that plan to get to that goal. And of course, there's lots of communities on all the social networks of people. So for instance, join a community that if you're interested in, say, becoming a baker, there's loads of different wonderful communities out there for you to sign up to, talk to like-minded people and see if that's for you.
And presumably the internet is the first port of call. There are a huge amount of communities out there willing to take in new members, presumably.
This would have been a bigger challenge, I think, 20, 30 years ago, that you would have been kind of kept to your local sphere, your local newsletter, or maybe a bulletin board somewhere. Now the world is open to you. So you can converse with people across the world that are like-minded like you, or who have made that change. And that's the most fascinating thing. The internet has changed it all. So it has made it possible for people to make that change in their 40s, 50s, 60s, even their 70s.
Alan Swan, creator of the podcast Older Not Over, thank you very much for sharing your insights and experience with us here today on France 24.
Thank you.
A reminder now of our